opening on Kia in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to All Women, Real Talk for Real Women. Well, South Africa is facing a literacy crisis at the moment. About 78% of grade 4 children are unable to read and also string along a simple sentence. Our next guest is Andrew Rudge. He's the CEO of the Rudge Trust, and he's doing some amazing work tackling this social issue. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you very
I
much.
almost called you Aldrew. I don't know where that came from.
That's quite all right. I respond to many names.
Okay, we'll stick with Andrew today. Tell us, how bad is illiteracy in the classrooms?
It's beyond a crisis. It's absolutely shocking. I mean, one uses a number like 78%, but if you reference it a little bit in your local context, so as an example, if I take my daughter, Ava, who's now in grade 5, if she was sitting with 9 of her classmates, so there's 10 of them in total, that would mean that 8 of the 10 cannot read. Now, all 10 can read in my daughter's class. And if you look at averages, and if the average is 78%, it means that in some schools, all the children can't read. Now, the reason that's such a disaster is the further up you get in the education system, the more it is built upon your ability to read. So you acquire all your knowledge through reading a textbook primarily. So if you can't read grade 4, you're doomed, pretty much. It's very, very hard to change it.
You know, I've heard some stories of, if you're looking at more first world versus third world type countries, that there's definitely a huge contrast between the two. And in some of the first world countries, I mean, children are starting at the age of 4, you know, and by the time they hit school, when it's already at grade 1, they know how to read. Why has this been something that has not been addressed, I would think, so seriously? Because, I mean, here you are, you're doing amazing work, but I would think that it's the role of all of us, you know, as a collective here in the whole of the country to actually make that change and push this forward.
Yeah, you're completely right.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, we're doing good work, but fundamentally we need everyone to be doing this work. The biggest problem we face is parents think, I must care for my child and then I hand them over to the schooling system to be educated. The problem is, if you look at the neuroscience, all of the stimulation of children and all the wiring is actually happening in the first 6 years of your life. So if the children aren't stimulated during the first 6 years, they arrive at school and they're not actually ready to learn. Teachers are very, you know, they're sitting in big classrooms. It's hard for them to give a child one-on-one attention. And if the child arrives in that environment and they're already sort of not ready to learn, then the teacher's starting off on the back foot and we're putting unnecessary pressure on them.
If you look at your average South African family, and by average I'm meaning if you have your black family and led by a single parent who doesn't have the resources, and by resources I'm not only talking about the financial resources, but perhaps time-wise. She's out working all hours and has to come home and is utterly exhausted. Is it such a dire expectation that, you know, I've had these kids, let's now push them over to the school system and hopefully I'll be able to get what I myself can't provide?
Yeah. I think that's fair enough, but part of the problem is that if you wait that long, you've actually missed the golden opportunity.
So what am I going to do as the single parent who myself didn't even finish school?
Yeah. So I think part of and what we're really trying to work on is decoding the complexity of reading and making it accessible for a parent or an adult who has a low level of literacy. So what we like to talk about is the gogo effect. Can we produce content that we can give to a gogo who might be illiterate but is caring for children? So how do we get them to do stuff with their kids that are actually building early literacy foundations? So to use the literacy experts would probably shoot me for this, but I'm going to explain this in quite a simplistic way. Okay. To read competently in grade 4, you need to look at a sentence and understand that the sentence is made up of different words and each word has a different meaning. Okay. Now to do that, you need to look at each word and see that they're different combinations of letters. Okay. As you look at the letters, or as the words with different combinations, you need to know that each letter is different and you need to be able to identify that. Okay. So now a child around the age of 5 and 6, they begin to learn their letters. But to understand your letters, you need to know that they're fundamentally made up of different shapes. Okay, to give you an example, if you were to distinguish between a V and an O, or I should say V and O, if you pronounce it phonetically correct, you need to know that it's fundamentally a triangle versus a circle. Okay, so when you're with a 3-year-old and you're teaching them their shapes, and you're teaching them the difference between a triangle and a circle, you're actually helping them to read. And a goggle can teach a triangle and a
Sure.
circle.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So I think, yes, a lot of parents are under extreme time pressure, but there is someone in the community who is looking after these children. Often they're just being sort of cared for, but not stimulated. So what we're trying to do is get some of the stimulation to the carers.
Okay.
So Andrew, tell me more about this project the literacy project that you have launched. It's been going for about 2 years. You've reached, a good few thousand kids already. Tell us what it is you're doing and how it all works.
Yeah, so we worked with the Western Cape Department of Social Development and then two fantastic literacy organisations. One is WordWorks, and they've got a program called Families Learning Together. And it's all about identifying everyday situations that can be turned into learning opportunities. If you get children to sort things, okay, you're actually stimulating the part of the brain that you use for complex language later in life. Take a simple activity, and it could be in a very low resource environment, and a gogo could do it. You just need to help her understand that playing a sorting game. It's also good for early mathematical skills. So what we did is we took their content and we turned it into a mobile application. You look at the image and you listen to a soundbite to understand what it's all about. And we made the sound bites available in English, Afrikaans, Xhosa and Zulu. So we're trying to make sure that the underlying content is accessible to as many people as possible.
Is this available just for smartphones or is it for feature phones as well?
It does work on feature phones. It's a
Okay.
slightly better experience on a smartphone.
Yeah.
And the key thing we've done with smartphones is we've enabled it to run offline. So you download the app,
Okay, that's great.
and after that it's completely free to use.
Yeah.
So part of the rollout to date has been around holding what we call activation events,
Okay.
where we invite parents from the community into a venue where we've set up free Wi-Fi, we help them with the download. We do a lot around explaining the context of early stimulation and the role that they can play. Because unfortunately, they have largely been disempowered by the system. So they don't believe that they can educate their child. So if you could get that across and you can show them the really simple things they can be doing with their kids, it's literally like seeing a light bulb go off.
In my day, which was a long time ago, when I was a kid, I don't think anything was done until I went to school. But I suppose a lot of stuff was done without realizing sorting stuff.
Yes.
That would
Yes.
come in like tidy your
Yes.
room, put your shoes together, things like that.
The fact that
Yeah.
some of our parents read to us as young children is probably the single most important thing that happened to you. Because if you look at how, essentially at the age of 6, your brain has twice as many neural synapses as it does as an adult. During the first 6 years of your life, your brain is just going crazy. You're forming way too many synapses, and then you undergo a system of pruning. So what gets pruned is the synapses you're not using. But if your literacy synapses have been activated because your parent read to you, then they maintain through adult. If unfortunately you weren't stimulated the right way, then those synapses have been lost. The same applies with early mathematical concepts. So a lot of the stuff that we naturally do with our kids, like helping them count, or if you've got siblings, dividing things between siblings equally, all of that is actually explaining concepts like fractions. You know, it's really important for later mathematical attainment. Yeah.
There's probably also the role of play in that there's some complicated play that we engaged in, certainly when I was young.
Yeah.
That looking back now, I see that perhaps in some way it set me up.
We were outside, we were playing tennis with our make-believe tennis bats and balls.
Yeah.
You know, we were in the road playing hopscotch, all those
playing
kinds
with
of
stones.
things. We were playing with stones.
Activating our imagination.
Yeah. I mean, does that play a huge role as well, I would think, in actually giving you the foundation for when you do go to school and you do start learning, you know, in the school system itself?
Absolutely, it's probably the most critical thing. What we tend to like to talk about is purposeful play or structured play, not just random play. But any play is good, particularly for gross motor development. But if you can find ways to mix it up for children so that they're developing different components, that's the sort of the best thing to do. So if you look at a country like Finland that is widely regarded as having the best education system, they don't start formal schooling until the age of 8. They actually they go to school, but they play. But it's quite structured play. So it's play where it's stimulating imagination, curiosity, problem solving. Just think about it. If you're shooting something with a catapult, you're learning more about force and momentum and trajectory than you are if you're being taught it with a piece of paper. So it's play is fundamental. Unfortunately, one of the sad things we're seeing, particularly in informal settlements, is because there's not much space and it's quite an unsafe environment, these children are being put into to small environments and not playing enough. And we're seeing gross motor deficiencies. There's so many things one can do with the young children or with a young child that can stimulate them. So just a lot of talking to a child is very important. Okay, so the more a child is spoken to, the more their vocabulary develops. There was a stat I saw from the US a few years ago which said that by the age of 3, a child whose parents are graduates will have 3 times the vocabulary of a child whose parents finished school. Okay, and that's mainly to do with the vocabulary that the child is hearing. So the more the parents are speaking, the brain's just absorbing that. So just talking to a child is an important thing. So that's not happening enough. Children are not growing up with a love of books. So you know, the most wonderful thing to do is to see a young child, say aged 4, long before they can read themselves, to pick up a book and play and act like they're reading.
So it could be like an accessibility to books.
Completely.
Even.
So that's one of the key criteria. We often talk about, you know, the poverty trap is quite well known. The idea that most children are victims of their circumstances. So if you're born into poverty, it's hard to break out of poverty. The same thing happens with literacy. So if you're born into a household with a low level of literacy, or where the adults have a low level of literacy, the odds are that you'll be further behind than other children. And you could talk about a book poverty. So if you grow up in a household and there aren't books, how do you model behavior? How do you model what your parents are doing if there are no books?
Absolutely.
I think we've also lost a little bit of our culture of storytelling. You know, it doesn't have to be a physical book, but it's about storytelling. And one of the most important things is learning how to describe experiences and feelings. So you know, most vocabulary programs focus on teaching the child a word linked to an object. So I'm looking here at glasses or a bowl or a table. But actually it's far more important for the child to learn to describe how they're feeling. Or if you give them something like they bite a lemon and they feel the sour and you can reinforce the word sour, they're learning about and they're learning to describe things. That helps them far more later in life because it's not actually about the table, it's about the adjective you used or the way you did. The other part of that is around emotional intelligence. So the better you can describe your own feelings, the more you can empathize with other people and understand their situation.
And it's also, I think, finding that bridge between the usage of mother tongue in one's primary home, and then as one goes to school, enters the school system, being about how do we make space for a new language, for instance, and creating a space where children can learn to read in a different language altogether. So, you know, I think second language users are really struggling. Of course, it's important for them and it's good for them when they learn in terms of their own development. But there is that extra nudge that they need to move out of using home language, mother tongue, and starting to learn how to read and comprehend in a different language altogether.
There are significant issues with switching languages. But if you actually look at the neuroscience, people are capable of learning many languages. It's actually to do with, again, the first 6 years of your life. If you get really good foundations in your home language, then all other languages become competencies. And so again, there's a problem in the education system, and we tend to blame a lot of the literacy problems on that. But actually, we're all capable of speaking multiple languages. It's almost a red herring to go down to focus too much on the language switch. If we can address the issue earlier, then it's not a problem.
So you said you're deliberately not doing it as an app for a child. What's your take on that, and why don't you do an app for kids?
Okay, so I mean, it's multifaceted, and it would be hypocritical of me to say that my children don't use apps, because they absolutely do. We do try and look at the app that they're using before we allow them to use it, and we try and limit the time as much as we can. But if you go back a little bit, in early childhood space, there are 3 main things you're worried about. Nutrition, so obviously you want children eating healthy food. You want stimulation, and then the third aspect is relationships. So it's very important for a young child to have a stable relationship with an adult. Okay? And one of our concerns is if we are introducing technology to the child, particularly in difficult or a household that is facing difficult circumstances, single mother, you know, we don't have to go into great detail. We understand some of the environments that these children are growing up in. there's a very real danger that the child forms a relationship with the technology
Right.
and it
Mm,
bypasses
okay.
the relationship with the parent or the adult.
Yeah.
So our objective is to help that adult to spend quality time with their child to form a better relationship between them.
Sure.
But time is a big issue. So
Yeah.
one of the things to do that we look to do is it's like a micro. We want them to engage with their children regularly, ideally daily, but we don't expect them to spend hours with their child. If you could do 5 minutes of really high quality engagement with a child, it's actually going to have a big impact.
What is the app called and where can we get it?
So it's available on the Play Store. So if you have an
Okay.
Android phone, you can download it. There are a couple of apps. Care Up was our first app that we launched about 2 years ago,
Okay.
and that's mainly focused on 4 to 5 year old children.
Okay.
But we will be launching a new app called WordWorks, and that'll be from birth to 6. So it's a much broader range of content. So I'd really recommend trying that out. And it's absolutely free, and it's available in 4 languages. So English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, and Zulu.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much for coming in. It's been so nice having you in because it's really such an important issue and it's something that we really want to look at more of on this show. Stay tuned. We've got Dr. Layla up next on All Woman. Stay tuned. We've got Dr. Layla up next on All Woman.